There is a particular kind of fear that only exists when somebody has been typing for too long. You know the bubble I mean. 3 dots, gone. 3 dots again, gone. Then nothing for 40 seconds, which is long enough for your brain to draft the message they might be drafting. Respond to it. Regret your response. Remember something you said in 2019 and decide your entire friendship has been held together by a misunderstanding. My phone was face down on the couch because I had already told myself I was not going to keep checking it. I had said this out loud, which is how you know I did not believe me. Jay looked at me, then looked at the phone, and asked whether putting the screen against the cushion made it less of a phone. I said, "It makes it less available." He said, "You can still hear it vibrate." That was not the point. The point was symbolism. The phone vibrated. I picked it up so fast I almost threw it into my own face. This is the many channels of cable. And today we are talking about group chats, the most efficient system human beings have created for laughing at one photograph, planning nothing successfully, and accidentally finding out which of your friends has been quietly irritated for 6 months. I love a group chat. I need to say that before I begin criticizing one, because I do not want this to sound like I am above it. I am not above anything that lets me send a picture of a badly dressed mannequin to 4 people at once. There are whole stretches of my life held together by a row of names at the top of a screen. Some friendships live in kitchens and passenger seats. Some live in the long voice note you record while walking from one room to another, because you need both hands free to explain why a person has lost their mind. The chat that night had started with a screenshot. Most trouble does. The room around me was quiet enough that every vibration sounded larger than it was. Jay was doing his own thing beside me, which should have helped me remember that I was sitting in an actual room with an actual person. Instead, part of my attention had moved into the phone and was pacing around in there. That is what a group chat can do. It creates a second room on top of the one you are already in. Your body may be on a couch, at a desk, in a grocery line, or pretending to watch television. Meanwhile, the mind has entered a separate gathering where everybody is talking at once, and punctuation has become facial expression. I have looked up from a chat and realized I missed an entire scene of something Jay and I were watching. Not because the conversation on the phone was more important, but because it had the particular urgency of unfinished social information. Somebody had typed a sentence with a period where they normally used an exclamation point. Somebody else had reacted but not answered. A third person had entered, scrolled backward, and responded to the least important part. The phone does not have to ring to take over a room. Sometimes all it needs is 3 dots. One friend sent a post from somebody we all knew just enough to have an opinion about. That is the dangerous category. Not close enough to call them, not distant enough to ignore them. The caption was vague in the way people become vague when they want a very specific person to feel accused. The first response in the chat was a question mark. The second was, "Oh, this is about somebody." The third was me saying, "We are not doing forensic literature tonight. while immediately zooming in on the screenshot like a federal employee. That is what a group chat does. It turns ordinary people into departments. One person is research, one is legal, one is memory, and memory will remind everyone what happened at a birthday dinner 3 years ago. One is human resources, who appears every 20 minutes to say, maybe we should not assume. Nobody listens to human resources until the situation has developed consequences. I tend to become corrections. Not because I am always correct. That would be a beautiful job description. And an irresponsible lie. I become corrections because I cannot stand when a story gets one detail wrong. Especially if the wrong detail makes somebody look better than they behaved. That was not the same night. I will type. She did not leave. She went to the bathroom and came back. He did not say that in the restaurant. He said it outside, after we had already paid. The details matter to me because details are where people hide. A person can survive a broad summary. We had a disagreement is very dignified. You raised your voice beside a decorative fountain while holding a bag of leftovers you did not offer to share has less room for public relations. The problem is that when you become the Department of Corrections, people begin sending every story to your desk. They expect you to remember the exact sequence, the missing context, the tone, the date, the fact that someone was hungry and someone else had already had 2 drinks. You become responsible for the archive. And archives are heavy, even when they are made of screenshots. That night, the typing bubble belonged to a friend who had not said much. That was why I was watching it. The loud people in a group chat are rarely the mystery, because we have already delivered our position in 3 paragraphs, a GIF, and at least one reaction that could have stayed private. It is the quiet friend who types, deletes, types again, and finally sends, "Never mind," who can change the entire temperature. When the message finally arrived, it was only 1 sentence. It was not dramatic, it was clear, which made it harder to dodge. They said the joke we had been making was connected to something that had actually hurt them, and they were tired of pretending it was funny because everybody else had agreed on the tone. The chat went still. There are few silences louder than 4 people who all received the same message and are deciding who has to become a grown-up first. The strange thing about that silence was that nobody had actually gone anywhere. Every name was still at the top of the screen. The little indicators told me people had seen the message. We were all present. And somehow, standing several feet back from the conversation, hoping maturity would enter first and identify itself. My first instinct was to explain. I could feel the explanation assembling before I had decided whether it belonged there. I wanted to say we had misunderstood, that the joke had not been aimed the way it landed, that nobody wanted them to feel alone. All of that may have been true. None of it changed the fact that they had been carrying the hurt while the rest of us enjoyed the tone. An explanation can become a very polished way of asking the injured person to comfort everybody else. So I waited. Waiting is difficult when language is one of the tools you trust most. I know how to build context. I know how to soften a sentence make room for contradiction, and show that I understand more than one side. Those skills are useful until the moment calls for less language, not better language. The phone stayed in my hand. The screen dimmed. I touched it again before it went dark, not because I had anything to say yet, but because apparently I needed the device to know I remained emotionally available. Group chats pretend to be informal. They are not. Every group chat has a government, even if nobody admits there was an election. There is usually a mayor, the person who starts the plans and sends the reminders. There is a press secretary, the person who can make a conflict sound less ugly without technically lying. There is a minister of culture, responsible for songs, memes, television recommendations, and determining when a celebrity apology is insufficient. There is an emergency manager who knows everybody's address and will ask, "Are you home?" before you have finished explaining what happened. Then there is the person who reacts to every message but contributes almost no language. They are the silent member of parliament. They have voted with a heart, a laugh, a shocked face, and occasionally the little emphasis marks that feel surprisingly judgmental when placed beneath the wrong sentence. I have been in chats where my role changed depending on the day. Sometimes I am the comedian because I can feel the conversation getting heavy and I know exactly which badly timed observation will let everyone breathe. Sometimes I am the organizer, which is a dangerous position for me because I like the idea of organizing more than I enjoy the follow-through. I can create a beautiful plan. I can name the event. I can choose the font. Ask me whether the reservation has been made, and suddenly I have become spiritual about uncertainty. There are also days when I am the one who disappears. That is the part nobody tells you about being expressive. People assume that because you can speak, you always want to. They know you as the friend with language, the friend who can explain what is happening, the friend who will turn a bad date or rude meeting into a story by the time dessert arrives. When you go quiet, people notice. But they do not always understand that the quiet may be the only room you have left. I have opened a group chat, read everything, laughed, worried, and then placed the phone down because I could not become another version of myself for anyone that night. I could not be funny Cable, thoughtful Cable, practical Cable, or the Cable who knows the exact sentence that will make somebody feel steadier. I had used those versions at work. I had used them in writing. I had used them while answering a family message that began with, "Quick question," which is one of the most dishonest openings in the English language. So I would leave the messages unread for a while, even though I had read them through the notification preview. That is digital dishonesty on a small scale. I was not ignoring anyone. I was privately attending. Then somebody would write, "Cable?" Just my name and a question mark. A question mark after your name can contain concern, accusation, affection, impatience, or all four. It depends on the friend and whether you have recently promised to send them something. The government of a group chat notices absence because the chat depends on everybody continuing to play their part. The person who sends the morning joke has to send it. The person who remembers birthdays has to remember. The person who objects when the gossip becomes cruel has to object. Once people become accustomed to your function, your silence can feel like a service interruption. That does not mean the friendship is false. It means friendship, like every living thing, develops habits. We learn one another through repetition. Aaron sends me something and already knows which part I will notice. Jay can hear the beginning of a story and guess whether I need advice or an audience. Friends learn the difference between my "I am fine," that means I need a minute, and my "I am fine," that means I have already decided to do something unwise and would prefer not to be interrupted. A group chat collects those habits until they begin to look like personalities. The funny friend becomes funny, even when he is tired. The calm friend becomes calm, even when she is furious. The strong friend becomes strong in a room where nobody has checked whether strength is still available. The chat government works because everyone recognizes the roles. It becomes dangerous when recognition turns into confinement. We need to talk about screenshots, because screenshots have changed friendship in a way I do not think we have fully respected. Before screenshots, you had to retell the conversation. That required interpretation. You had to say, "Then he said something like," and your friends could ask whether you were paraphrasing. Now you can submit evidence. Evidence has made us bolder and less accurate at the same time. A screenshot can prove the words. It cannot prove the room. It cannot prove that you had already called twice. It cannot show the hour before the message, when you were pacing or crying or laughing so hard you could barely type. It cannot show that a sentence was a callback to a joke from last week. It cannot show the facial expression you imagined while reading it, which may have done more damage than the actual punctuation. Still, we present screenshots like court exhibits. Exhibit A. Look at what they said. Exhibit B. Look at the time. Exhibit C. Please notice that I asked a direct question and they sent a thumbs up. The thumbs up has ruined lives. Not major lives, perhaps, but evenings. A thumbs up from a person who normally uses full sentences can feel like a door closing. A thumbs up from a parent can feel like a clerical response to your existence. A thumbs up after you have written 2 paragraphs is not punctuation. It is architecture. It is a small wall. I once sent a screenshot to a friend and cropped it so carefully that I realized I was no longer asking for perspective. I was building a case. That realization embarrassed me because I had told myself I wanted honesty. What I wanted was a jury. There is a difference. When we ask friends for perspective, we have to be willing for the perspective to arrive facing the wrong direction. A real friend may look at the screenshot and ask why we responded the way we did. A real friend may remember that this is the 3rd time the same conflict has appeared with different lighting. A real friend may say, "I understand why you are angry, but I think you are leaving out the part where you were already done before they answered." That is why every group chat needs somebody who is not impressed by the prosecution. The person who is not impressed by the prosecution is rarely the most popular person for the next 5 minutes. Everybody loves honesty in theory. In practice, we often want honesty to arrive after it has agreed with us. We send the screenshot to the friend whose response we can already hear. We know who will say, absolutely not, who will say, block them, and who will request additional evidence because they enjoy a complete file. Sometimes I have selected the audience before admitting I was asking for a verdict. That does not mean friends should become emotionally neutral. A friend is allowed to be on your side. I want my people to care when something hurts me. I just need at least one person who understands that being on my side does not require helping me become innocent in every version of the story. There is a particular kind of love in the question that ruins your argument but improves your memory. What did you say before that? What happened the last time? Are you upset about this message, or are you upset that they did not respond the way you hoped? Baby, sometimes I do not invite a witness so they can become a detective in my own house. But the question sits there anyway, moving furniture around. I have friends who love me enough to interrupt my editing. I will tell the story in a way that makes me look wounded and reasonable. They will let me finish because they are respectful and because the story is entertaining. Then they will ask one small question. What did you say right before that? I hate that question. It has ended some of my best performances. The truth is that I am not always the hero of the screenshot. Sometimes I am not even the victim. Sometimes I am a well-dressed participant in a conflict I helped create. It is comforting to believe the people who hurt us were always less careful than we were. It is also usually incomplete. I have delayed responses on purpose. I have chosen wording that could pass as polite while carrying a knife. I have said, "No worries," when worries were the only thing I had prepared. I have used silence to make another person feel the absence of my attention. Because saying, "I want you to notice me," felt too exposed. A screenshot can preserve every word and still miss the truth. That night, when our quiet friend finally said the joke had been hurting them, the original screenshot stopped mattering. The court was dismissed. We were no longer discussing somebody else's vague caption. We were standing in the consequences of our own tone. One friend apologized immediately. It was a good apology, which means it did not include a paragraph about intention. Another friend asked a question, not, "Why did you not tell us sooner?" That question often punishes the person for reaching the point where they could finally speak. They asked, "How long have you been feeling like that?" I watched the typing bubble again. This time, I was not afraid of what they would say about me. I was afraid of how long they had been alone inside something we had all been calling a joke. Text has limits. That is why voice notes exist, and why some of us have abused the privilege. A voice note should probably be a minute or two. Mine have acts. I begin with, "This will be quick," which is a warning sign. Then I forget a name, walk into another room, return to the point, introduce a second person who was not in the original story, and say, "Wait, let me give you the background." As if I have not already given 12 minutes of background. The friend receiving the note can see the length before pressing play, which is the digital version of watching somebody approach your table carrying a folder and realizing they have tabs. I love voice notes because they restore some of what screenshots remove. You hear breath. You hear the laugh that does not belong to happiness. You hear when somebody says they are not upset while putting every available piece of furniture into the sentence. You hear the pause before a name. A voice can confess what a sentence is still trying to manage. There have been nights when a friend's voice note felt closer than a phone call because they could speak without performing my reaction in real time. They could say the whole thing, including the embarrassing part, and I could listen before choosing my first sentence. That distance can be kind. It gives us a chance to answer the person rather than our own alarm. It can also become another kind of theater. I have recorded a voice note, listened back, deleted it, and recorded a more composed version. The first one had the truth. The second one had better pacing. That is the problem with having language available. You can revise yourself before anyone meets the feeling. People praise articulate pain because it is easier to receive. It arrives with context and transitions. It tells you where to stand. Raw pain is inconvenient. It repeats. It contradicts itself. It may accuse the wrong person before finding the actual wound. I have spent years becoming a person who can explain what happened to me. That skill has helped me write, speak, teach, love, and survive rooms that rewarded confusion in other people, as long as I remained understandable. It has also allowed me to turn my own feelings into a presentation before I have felt them. The group chat encourages this because the audience is already assembled. You have names at the top of the screen. You know which friend will laugh, which friend will worry, and which friend will ask the question you are avoiding. You can deliver the story and receive the reactions almost immediately. Sometimes that is care. Sometimes it is a way to leave yourself before the feeling gets too close. After our friend told us the joke had hurt, I started recording a voice note. I wanted them to hear my tone. I wanted to apologize without sounding formal. I wanted to explain that I had misunderstood what was happening, that I was sorry, that I did not expect them to make the pain easier for us by packaging it correctly. The note became 4 minutes. I listened to the first 30 seconds and deleted it. Not because it was bad. It was too complete. It sounded like I had already reached the end of something. They were still standing inside. I sent a shorter message. I said I was sorry. I said I believed them. I said I wanted to listen before I explained anything. Then I put the phone down. That was harder than writing the 4-minute note. Putting the phone down did not feel peaceful. It felt unfinished. I wanted to check whether they had read the apology. Then I wanted to check whether they were typing. Then I wanted to check whether the lack of typing meant the message had landed badly, even though the entire point of the message was that they did not owe me an immediate response. This is the embarrassing part of apologizing. You may still want reassurance that you apologized well. You may want the person to tell you that you are not terrible, that the friendship is intact, that they understand your intention, and that the discomfort can now be filed under growth. That is a lot of administrative work to hand somebody who just told you they were hurt. So I left the phone on the table and sat with the possibility that my apology would not produce a clean emotional receipt. Jay asked whether everything was okay. I told him the simple version, because the story did not belong entirely to me, and because I was still trying to understand my part without turning the friend into an episode while the conversation was happening. He nodded and let the quiet remain quiet. That helped. Not every difficult moment needs a panel. Red receipts are a choice people make for reasons I do not understand. I know they can be practical. I know some people like clarity. I know a blue checkmark can reassure you that information arrived. I also know that read 8:47 p.m. has caused more amateur psychology than many graduate programs. Why did they read it and not respond? Were they busy? Were they upset? Did the message require thought? Did they open it while standing in a grocery aisle and then forget because someone moved a cart into their ankle? The group chat does not care. The group chat has recorded attendance. You can see who has seen the message. You can see who is present but withholding. That knowledge makes silence feel deliberate, even when life is simply happening off-screen. This is where friendship through a phone becomes unfair. The device gives us evidence of access without telling us whether somebody has the time or energy to answer. A person may have seen your message. That does not mean they had the words, the privacy, the attention, or the strength to answer. They may be at work. They may be sitting beside somebody who cannot know what is being discussed. They may be in the middle of their own bad news. They may be tired of being the version of themselves the chat expects. I have had to learn this because I am capable of making another person's delay about me with impressive speed. The mind hates an empty space. It fills one with history. If you have been ignored before, a delayed response does not remain a delayed response. It becomes a familiar hallway. If you have spent years wondering whether people tolerate you until they find a quieter option, the typing bubble can feel like judgment. If you learned early that affection could be withdrawn without warning, the absence of a reply may wake a much older room. The phone is new. The fear is not. That does not mean every fear is irrational. Sometimes people do use delayed responses to communicate distance. Sometimes the person is avoiding you. Sometimes the group has moved into another chat, which is the digital equivalent of finding out there was a meeting after the meeting. We should admit that adults can be petty with technology, because technology gives pettiness tools. You can mute a person without confronting them. You can remove someone from a close friends list and wait for them to notice. You can watch a story while ignoring a message, which may be innocent, but never looks innocent. You can send a reaction instead of an answer. You can allow a friendship to thin through increasingly delayed responses until nobody has to say it ended. I do not think every friendship needs a formal closing ceremony. Some relationships complete themselves quietly. People move, change, become busy, or stop fitting without anybody committing a crime. The danger is pretending that quiet always means gentle. Sometimes quiet is cowardice with good battery life. In the chat that night, the read receipts became comforting because we could see that everyone had stayed. Nobody left. Nobody made the hurt friend carry the discomfort alone, while the rest of us took private time to decide whether we agreed with their pain. We answered slowly. We did not answer perfectly. One person said something clumsy and corrected it. Another admitted they had noticed the friend going quiet before, but had interpreted it as mood rather than withdrawal. I said I had been too entertained by the group tone to ask whether everybody was still inside it. That sentence bothered me after I sent it, because it was true beyond the chat. I have been in rooms where I understood the joke, benefited from the joke, and did not notice who had become the price of the joke. Humor can build belonging quickly. It can also draw the border around who is safe to laugh. The best group chats know how to laugh without requiring one person to stay available as material. We had not done that. Every group chat has side chats. We need to stop acting shocked about this. The side chat is where two people say, "Did that seem weird to you?" It is where plans become more realistic, feelings become less diplomatic, and somebody asks whether the group chat is the correct place to respond. A side chat can protect a friendship. It can also become a room where the friendship is being discussed without being invited. I have participated in both versions. Sometimes you need to check your interpretation before making a public accusation. Sometimes you need a friend to tell you that the message was not strange. You are tired, and punctuation has not declared war. Sometimes a side chat keeps a moment from becoming larger than it is. Other times, the side chat becomes the real relationship, and the group chat becomes its lobby. Two people share the actual opinions privately. They return to the group with softened versions, inside jokes, and decisions that appear spontaneous. The rest of the group can feel the current without seeing the water. I know what it is like to suspect that people are discussing me in another thread. Most of us do. The suspicion is rarely about the exact words. It is about losing control of the version of yourself being circulated. That fear has followed me through different rooms. Small towns can create a version of you before you have language for yourself. Workplaces can decide you are difficult, dependable, intense, warm, emotional, polished, or a lot, based on a handful of moments. Families can keep repeating a childhood role long after you have become an adult who no longer recognizes it. A side chat is a tiny version of that. Your name appears in a room where you cannot revise the sentence. The honest answer is that I have also been relieved by side chats. There are times when I needed to say, "I love this person, but I cannot answer this right now," to somebody who understood the whole map. There are times when I wanted to vent without making the other person responsible for my first reaction. There are times when I needed to be unfair privately, so I could become fair before speaking. Privacy is not betrayal. Processing is not prosecution. The question is what the private room produces. Does it help you return with more care? Does it make the conflict clearer? Does it give you a place to say the ugly first sentence so you do not make it someone else's final memory? Or does it turn another person into a shared project? After the conversation in our group chat settled, one friend messaged me privately. They said they felt awful and did not know whether to say more. My first instinct was to reassure them because I knew the discomfort. I wanted to say, "You did not mean it." That sentence may have been true, but it was not useful. Intention had already had plenty of representation. I told them that feeling awful was probably appropriate for a minute. We had hurt somebody. The goal was not to escape the feeling quickly enough to feel like good people again. Then I added that shame would not help if it made them disappear. We still had to behave differently. I was proud of that answer for approximately 10 minutes, which is when I realized I had phrased it like somebody's aunt who keeps a mug that says, "Choose kindness." So I sent another message. I said, "Also, please do not turn this into a personal documentary where you are now the most injured person. Stay in the chat." They laughed. That laugh mattered. Not because it erased what happened, but because it returned us to a language we knew without using humor to avoid the issue. The side chat helped us re-enter the group chat more honestly. That is the best use of a private room. You do not build a home there. You wash your face and go back downstairs. Nobody tells you how much administration is required to maintain adult friendship. Friendship administration is not glamorous, but it is where many relationships either survive or become a sentence people say fondly in the past tense. Somebody has to remember that one friend works late on Thursdays. Somebody has to know that another person cannot eat at the place everybody keeps suggesting. Somebody has to notice that the group keeps saying soon, as though soon has ever reserved a table. The older I get, the more friendship depends on tiny acts that would look unimpressive in a movie. Sending the address again without making the person feel foolish. Moving the time by 30 minutes. Checking whether a loud restaurant is actually going to work for everybody. Asking whether the person wants advice before unloading the advice you already organized. The group chat makes this labor visible because all the unfinished planning remains on the screen. Are we still doing Saturday? What time? Which Saturday? Wait, I thought this was next month. Then one person sends a calendar invitation, and suddenly the chat reacts as though a government agency has overreached. I have watched 5 adults express deep love for one another while becoming completely unable to choose between 6 and 6:30. The affection is real. So is the scheduling failure. There are birthdays, calendars, transportation, food preferences, allergies, children, spouses, work shifts, money, chronic illness, social batteries, travel distance, and the fact that everybody is tired in a different direction. When we were younger, friendship could happen because we were trapped in the same building. School provided proximity. Work sometimes provides proximity, though it also provides policies. Adult friendship has to be maintained on purpose. But I hesitate to say that too proudly, because even friendship can start sounding like another task to add to the calendar. Sometimes friendship is not planned at all. It is a voice note sent while unloading the dishwasher because you miss somebody, and the dishwasher is already open. Group chats make adult friendship possible in the cracks. A photograph from a grocery store can keep a person inside your day. A ridiculous observation can say, "I know how you think." A message sent at midnight can cross time zones, marriages, jobs, and years. That is not lesser intimacy because it happened on a screen. I have friends whose lives I know through small updates. A new haircut, a difficult meeting, a child losing a tooth, a meal that looked better online than it tasted, a parent in the hospital, a dog behaving like an unsupervised landlord. None of these messages is the friendship alone. Together they create a record of attention. The administration becomes a problem when one person becomes responsible for all of it. There is often a friend who remembers to check in, confirms the plan, notices the silence, and restarts the conversation after everyone has drifted. That labor can look natural because the person is good at it. People confuse ease with absence of cost. I have been that friend. I have also benefited from that friend. There are relationships I believed were mutual until I stopped initiating. The silence that followed did not mean the other person never cared. It meant care had been organized around my motion. When I stopped moving, nothing carried us forward. That can hurt without becoming an indictment. Some people love passively. They are grateful when you appear and do not know how to create the appearance. Some friendships survive that imbalance because each person contributes something different. Others become a job with sentimental benefits. The group chat makes imbalance visible. Who starts the conversation? Who responds to a vulnerable message with more than a reaction? Who shows up when the topic is not funny? Who remembers the plan after voting in the poll? Polls are another lie. A group chat poll suggests democracy. In reality, 5 people choose different days and the organizer eventually declares a date based on emotional exhaustion. I once watched a plan dissolve through 27 messages. Everyone wanted to see each other. Nobody could agree on where, when, what to eat, whether parking mattered, or how late was too late. At the end, somebody wrote, "We should definitely do something soon," which is the official statement released after a failed summit. The friendship was real. The event was theoretical. I do not think we need to prove love through perfect scheduling. I do think we have to notice when our care only exists as good intentions. A person cannot attend the dinner you almost planned. They cannot feel the check-in you meant to send. The group chat that night became quieter after the apology. Not dead. Careful. Careful is not always bad. Sometimes a relationship needs to hear its own footsteps again. The friend who told us they were hurt was also one of the funniest people in the chat. That mattered because we had mistaken their ability to make a joke for proof that the joke was safe. Funny people are often given a strange assignment. We are expected to turn pain into something other people can hold without getting their clothes dirty. If we tell the story well, people admire our honesty. If we tell it badly, while still angry or confused, they may call us dramatic. The humor becomes a passport. It lets difficult material cross the border. I know this because I have used it. There are things from my childhood, my body, work, illness, race, queerness, and the South that I can make very funny. The funny version is not false. Sometimes absurdity is the truest part. A cruel room can also have terrible wallpaper. A frightening day can include an argument about parking. A family conflict can pause because somebody needs to check the oven. Life does not respect genre. The danger is believing that because I found the joke, I finished the feeling. I have left stages, conversations, and recordings after people laughed and felt lonelier than before I spoke. They heard the story. They enjoyed the shape. I had given them the version with timing, and the part of me that lived it was still waiting somewhere behind the line. Friendship should be one place where the funny person can tell the story without making it good. That is harder than it sounds. When people know your rhythm, they respond to the pause before the joke. They may laugh before you are ready. They may assume the dramatic detail is set up. You may hear yourself delivering the line, because it is easier than asking everyone to stay with you in the part that has no ending. I have had to say, "I am not joking right now," and then feel guilty because the room had only followed the language I taught it. Our friend had been teaching us to laugh. We had not been listening for the places where the laugh changed. Once they explained it, I could remember moments. A reaction that came late. A subject changed quickly. A joke they stopped adding to. None of those moments was clear enough to make me responsible for reading their mind. They were clear enough to make me wonder whether I had been paying attention beyond the performance. This is where people become defensive. We want instructions. Tell me exactly what I should have noticed. Tell me the rule so I can pass next time. Human beings are inconvenient because there is no universal sign for "I am laughing" and also asking you to stop. Sometimes care means asking again when the answer arrives too easily. Sometimes it means allowing the funny person to become boring, repetitive, quiet, or angry, without deciding the friendship has changed for the worse. Sometimes the joke has to die so the person can remain. Leaving a group chat is one of the most theatrical actions available on a phone. The app announces it. Cable left the conversation. No explanation. No soft lighting. Your name becomes a sentence. I have fantasized about leaving chats with the same intensity people bring to resigning from a job. I imagine the silence afterward. I imagine somebody saying, "Did he mean to do that?" I imagine the private chats activating like emergency lights. Usually I do not leave. I mute. Muting is adult leaving. You remain technically present while refusing notification as a lifestyle. There are chats I have muted for 8 hours and checked every 6 minutes. This is not peace. It is surveillance without sound. Leaving can be necessary. Some groups become cruel. Some become exhausting. Some preserve a version of you that cannot breathe. Some chats are only active when there is conflict, gossip, or a request. Some people know how to reach you, but do not know how to be with you. Still, leaving is not always liberation. Sometimes it is a way to force the room to chase you. I have wanted to disappear so people would prove they noticed. I am not proud of that, but honesty that only includes dignified motives is public relations. There is a younger part of me that still believes absence is the clearest way to ask whether I matter. That part learned from rooms where direct need was dangerous or embarrassing. It learned to leave a small gap and watch whether anyone crossed it. Adult relationships ask me to use language instead. That is deeply inconvenient. Language can be refused. A dramatic exit at least gives you control of the door. Saying, "I feel outside this friendship," gives another person the chance to disagree, misunderstand, or tell you something you do not want to know. The friend in our chat did not leave. They stayed and said the thing. That was more generous than we had earned. By the end of the conversation, nobody had solved friendship. We had not written new community guidelines. We had not become people who would never miss a signal or make a joke that landed badly. We had become a little more aware of the cost of our ease. The chat eventually moved again. Somebody sent a picture unrelated to the conflict. For a second, nobody responded. Then the friend who had been hurt added a comment. It was funny. I felt relief and immediately distrusted it. Their humor did not mean we were finished. It meant they were still themselves. Those are not the same thing. I laughed. Then I answered without turning the laugh into a receipt, proving everything was fine. That may sound like a tiny distinction. Most friendship is tiny distinctions repeated over time. The next morning, the group chat looked ordinary. My first impulse was to check whether the tone had returned to normal. That phrase, "return to normal," can hide a lot. Normal for whom? The old normal had allowed one friend to keep laughing after the joke stopped being funny to them. A quick return would have made the rest of us comfortable, but comfort was part of what had kept the pattern going. Still, nobody wants every message after a conflict to arrive wearing protective equipment. You do not want friendship to become a seminar where each joke pauses for a risk assessment. The morning chat found its way back through ordinary things. A complaint about traffic. A photograph nobody had requested. Somebody asking a question they could have answered by scrolling up 6 messages. I watched the conversation move and tried not to grade it. That was new for me. I am very capable of turning a human interaction into quality assurance. Did we repair correctly? Is everybody using the updated procedure? Has the group demonstrated measurable improvement? Friendship does not provide that kind of report. Sometimes the evidence is simply that the next small moment goes differently. That is one of the strange things about phones. A serious conversation occupies the same rectangle as a grocery recommendation. The apology sits above a photograph of somebody's breakfast. The message that changed the relationship remains searchable beside a GIF. I scrolled up and reread parts of the night. Not all of it. There is a point where rereading becomes an attempt to supervise the past. I noticed how quickly I had wanted to make meaning. Even while apologizing, part of me had been arranging the lesson. That is a writer's bad habit, and sometimes a person's defense. If I can understand what the moment means, I can move it from the body into language. The chat did not need a lesson. It needed a different habit. A few days later, a joke began moving in the same direction. It was not identical, but I felt the old rhythm returning. I almost said nothing because I did not want to sound overly careful. Then I remembered that care rarely looks cool in real time. I wrote, "I think this is heading toward the thing we talked about." That was all. Nobody argued. Somebody changed the subject. The conversation continued. There was no speech and no grand proof. Just a small correction made before the old rhythm could settle back in. The Department of Corrections had finally found a useful assignment. I still love the chaos of a group chat. I love the terrible plans, the overlong voice notes, the messages sent from a store because somebody found an item that looks exactly like another person's personality. I love that friends can enter my day without knocking on the front door. I love that laughter can travel through a screen and change the room I am sitting in. I also know that a chat can become lazy with a person. It can use the same joke, the same role, the same expectation, until somebody feels known only as a function. A good friendship has to keep updating its information. Not constantly. We are not software. Nobody wants a relationship that sends a terms of service notice every Tuesday. We do have to allow people to become more complicated than the name beside their messages. The funny friend may need an evening without a punchline. The strong friend may send a sentence with no plan attached. The quiet friend may finally say the thing everyone else was too comfortable to notice. The friend who always remembers may forget. The person who usually corrects the story may have to admit they got it wrong. My phone is face down again while I am saying this. It has vibrated twice. I am going to finish before I look because I am practicing being one person in one room. There is still a group chat waiting for me. There is probably a screenshot. There may be a question mark after my name. I will answer. I may even answer without opening court.